and I don't quite see, and I don't have the witness enough to see that my conditioning is the very thing.
The pride of the fleets, the bright swinging frogmen of the UTT.
Hi, my name is Commander Divine. I'm a retired Navy SEAL and founder of the Courage Foundation. Around Memorial Day, we take time to remember all the veterans of foreign wars who've served and many who have given their lives in service to our country to keep us safe and to promote democracy. And I think it's particularly important to also remember those veterans who served but came home scarred and damaged from their service with post-traumatic stress. That insidious disease is killing 22 veterans a day to suicide. And these vets often have trouble reaching out. They don't know where to look for help, and the help they do receive is often limited or one-dimensional. At the Courage Foundation, we have the Veteran Integration Program, which helps these vets reintegrate and to find post-traumatic growth. If you find it in your heart to support this population that is grieving and needs our help, then check out our program at feedcourage.org. And please donate whatever you can so that we can help more vets reintegrate and become whole again. Thank you so much for your support. It's very important. Hoo-yah, Divine out.
Hey, this is Mark Divine. Welcome back to the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today. Hope you're enjoying your lockdown. I certainly am, and we're having some interesting times. So super stoked to talk about a little bit of that with Jayson Gaddis today, and we're going to talk about how to strengthen your relationship when you're locked down with your family. How interesting. What a perfect time for this. One other thing, this podcast has over 1,500 reviews. 99% of them are 5-star. But every review does count. And I'd love for you, if you haven't, to take a look at placing a review. It really does help. And I think we're ranked number 20 on iTunes for health-related podcasts. So that's awesome. So thank you very much for your support. So today, like I mentioned, Jayson Gaddis, he is the founder of the Relationship School and super interesting guy. He's really made it his life mission and passion to help men become more emotionally strong and to be better relationships, better parents, better spouses. And like I said, he's the founder of the Relationship School, and he's on this mission to help you transform your life through strong relationships. I mean, I've said this a lot of times to my clients, but your emotional development is going to be expressed through how you communicate with other human beings, starting with your loved ones, right? So back to staring down the wolf. You want to be a good leader, start there. Start there. And Jayson's here to help us today learn how to do that. Jayson, thanks so much for your time, and I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Yeah,
stoked to be here, Mark.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about where you are right now and what's going on in your life. Because I imagine you're sheltering in place, just like most of us are.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. So I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm hunkered down here with my family, my wife of 13-ish years and 2 kids, 9 and 11, boy and a girl. And it's going great. Overall, I'd say, Boulder's awesome because you can get outside, and I ride my mountain bike every couple of days, and I go on walks, and we have a trail.
They're not going to roll you up and throw you in the pen for riding your bike without a mask on or anything like that?
No. Although some dad actually in town just got arrested for playing softball with his daughter at a park because they've closed some of the parks down. So I thought that was kind of ridiculous.
I think I saw that on the news. That was you guys, huh? That's crazy.
I think it was here. I don't know. Maybe it was somewhere else.
Well, I live in Encinitas, and they literally rolled up 22 people for sitting in their cars watching the sunset the other day.
Oh,
and I was
shit.
like, what in the heck is that about? And they rolled up a bunch of surfers the day that Gavin Newsom closed the beaches. They, figured, okay, we'll make a show of this to scare other people, and they arrested surfers.
Wow!
And fined them $1,000. Like, a lot of these surfers don't have $1,000,
right?
And I'm thinking that makes perfect sense to me, right? Let's go ahead and punish the healthiest segments of society to make a statement. Doesn't that make a lot of sense, right? Like we're punishing all the small businesses,
right?
Who can't make it back. They can't be closed for 30 or 60 days. It doesn't matter how much stimulus money you throw at them.
Yeah, it's like another trial we weren't expecting is the cops or someone to tell us we can't.
I
to
know.
watch them
Well,
take
there's
care
like
of.
three strikes against this whole thing. First, obviously, there's the COVID, which, I don't want to mitigate the issues around that. It's definitely a viral and can be deadly for certain segments of the population. But the main blow has been, basically this knee-jerk reaction to shut down the economy.
Yeah.
And we're not going to necessarily go into that, but now everyone's reeling from that far more than they are from the COVID virus, unless you were one of the very few, the 0.04% of population that'll get actually medically affected by that. Yeah. And then the third, to add insult to injury, is, to turn on the police state around that. It's like, oh, come on, right? Really? It's hard for Americans who are grown up with that individualistic mindset and to want to be outdoors and be healthy to all of a sudden be forced to stay at home.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. It's, I wouldn't want to be those enforcers personally.
I wouldn't either. Now, check this out. So a lot of people are, gone from like constant distraction. A lot of really successful people are on the little gerbil wheel, up and out it, commuting to work, nonstop meetings and calls. And when they get home and then they plug right into TV or whatever. And then, their spouses, whether it's male or female, are doing the same thing with their little routines. And this has just been the normal. And all of a sudden it's all come to a stop. And you have people in the house together having to have conversations, often deep conversations with each other and with their kids for the first time in a long time. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, this has never happened, and we're in such an unusual time where, like you said, our routines are screeching to a halt, and now we're trapped at home. And if you're in a great relationship or you love your family, even that's going to be stressful because even if you love your best friend, or you need space from them from time to time. Right. You don't hang out with them 24/7. So, in a marriage or a family situation, especially if you've lost your job or your kids are now all at home because of, the schools are closed, this is just a recipe for a shit show. And child abuse and domestic violence. And we're seeing that numbers are going up of child abuse and domestic violence. All the reports are coming in. And that's scary. It's problematic.
It is scary. I don't know if you saw the meme, but some of the funniest memes have come out, as a result of this, at least in the early days. I think people are starting to get a little fed up. I haven't seen so many funny memes now. But like first week, some of the humor, right, they're losing their sense of humor. But this one was really funny. It relates to relationships and being at home. But it was like this Morpheus type character. And he's, obviously referring to the Matrix and, you're going to take the red pill or the blue pill. But what he says is, in this time of crisis, we've all got to step up, and you can either A, stay at home with your wife and kids, or B, and before he even got B out of his mouth, someone from the audience goes, B, I'll take B.
Exactly. Oh man.
It was just so funny because it's like, yeah, wow. A lot of people are thinking that, wow, I got to do that. I'm like you. I'm very blessed to have a great relationship. I'm enjoying the time with my wife and son and our extended family. And it's really been nice. My son is going a little bit bonkers. He's 21 and, he's taking all the distancing very seriously. And a lot of his friends aren't. So he's not going out with them, which I applaud him for. And, but it's tough, right? If you haven't, let's just get into like, how do you define a healthy relationship? Let's just talk about first between, husband, wife, or significant others. We can talk about kids later. Okay. How do you define that? And then how do you go about building that or repairing it? There's a lot to cover here.
Yeah, cool. I mean, it's probably subjective, but in my mind, a healthy relationship is one where two people are a team and it's mutual. The metaphor I use often is if we're out in a storm in the ocean and we've got this little dinghy, me and my wife, both of our paddles better be in the water. And there's a time for me to paddle harder or more. And there's a time when I need to rest and she needs to paddle. But what happens if I'm the only one paddling and she's not doing anything, we're going to go in a circle and it's going to be really frustrating. And this is what I see a lot of couples do. And I think that's true in a business partnership, even a great friendship. is if one person's kind of doing the heavy lifting for the relationship, it's just bound to lead to resentment over time. So a healthy relationship is one where two people are paddling, and we face the challenges together. And if the challenge is between us, we also learn how to face that as a team and not make each other out to be the bad guy or bad girl. It's like work. You grow and develop yourself.
Right.
I don't see many relationships last where there's not mutual growth going on.
Yeah, I agree. Now, what's interesting to me was coming up is you say, one person might be doing the work. Let's say, a lot of the women listening are saying, well, yeah, that's me. I'm doing all the work. And my husband is like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. Right. Yeah. So there's this kind of like lack of dialogue for a lot of guys, and it can go both ways. So I don't want to throw men under the bus, but my experience, of course, is that men typically turn a blind eye to the emotional development and often don't even know there's a problem.
Yeah.
Until the wife finally just sits them down or slugs them over the head and says, listen, we got a problem, right? I've been trying to communicate with you about this, but maybe she's not doing it skillfully, or maybe he's not able to listen. So, both partners, in order for them to row in the same direction, have to be aware of their emotional issues and how they're impacting the other person, how they're showing up and how their words and way of being are landing. That's not easy, is it?
No, it's very tough. And like you said in your example there, where the guy's kind of clueless, like, what are you talking about? And he, in his eyes, maybe he is working his ass off, right. Just not on the relationship. He's busting his ass to provide for the family, let's say. Mm-hmm. And maybe she's not totally getting or appreciating him for that. But a lot of guys, because they got shut down as boys around their emotional life, they learn that love means I do a bunch of stuff for other people. And that's good. That's cool. But if a man wants a heart connection with a woman and have like sexual intimacy that's actually interesting and fulfilling and a deep bond, his heart has to be online. He has to learn emotional intelligence and emotional literacy. And a lot of guys, they're afraid of that because their conditioning has told them you're a pussy or you're going to get your ass kicked if you go there. So, it's still like so embedded in the male psyche. So there's a lot of undoing that needs to happen here.
From your work with the men's groups or the men's, training that you do, what are some of the biggest signs or tells or, possible, I'm not sure what word I'm going to use here, but anyways, what are some of the biggest obstacles that they're facing, in terms of like things are there and they're not aware of it and you help them see it?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is male conditioning. That is the single biggest obstacle that men have, I think, today and the thing that makes it so hard, Mark, is that conditioning, you're blind to it because you're living inside of it, right? So it's like a prison. And I don't quite see, and I don't have the witness enough to see that my conditioning is the very thing holding me back. So a lot of guys I teach, it starts with just having a view that there is in fact this thing called conditioning, and you've been, you're subordinating to it every day when you believe all the bullshit messages men receive about emotions and vulnerability and relationships. And, that's the first place to start, is to kind of help a guy wake up to that. And I think, as we talked about on my interview with you for my podcast, is a lot of guys aren't going to wake up to that until they're in a tremendous amount of pain.
Right.
Pain was the thing that woke me up on my journey. I was completely had a big ego and I was very defended. And it wasn't until I was in enough pain that I submitted and was like, okay, maybe I'm the problem,
Hey folks, I want to tell you about a coffee alternative that I really enjoy that has medicinal mushrooms and adaptogens. It's got caffeine, but 1/7 as a cup of coffee, and you get the sustainable energy without the anxiety or jitters or the crash of coffee. It's got turmeric for inflation, cinnamon to suppress sugar craving, cacao and chai for mood and energy, lion's mane for focus, cordyceps for your physical performance, and chaga and reishi for immune and stress response. It's loaded. It gives me energy and focus without those jitters you get from drinking coffee. They donate a portion of each month's revenue to the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, which is important to me because we support vets with post-traumatic stress and those things help with depression. The team at Mudwater is giving you a special code, Unbeatable Mind, where you can receive 20% off your order at their website. Their website is mudwtr.com. That's mudwtr.com. Get 20% off using the code Unbeatable Mind. Hoo-yah. Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself then. Let's use you as a case study. You know, what was your conditioning like? How did that come about? You know, because your story will parallel a lot of guys, I'm sure, just like mine would.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so pretty normal middle class childhood where I had a stern father who was an entrepreneur and he worked his ass off 7 to 7 every day, and he was a professional athlete. And so I didn't get much of dad's kind of heart connection, love, emotion. It was very much my way or the highway.
Right.
And then on the playground, I also got the message that, you know, Jayson, because I grew up very sensitive, very emotional, empathic little boy, but I got the message from my environment that that was not going to be okay. So I tried to bury that, right, as much as I could and fit in. And I did that. I became good at sports and I fit in, and I was decent at school. And, you know, then eventually when girls started entering the picture in late adolescence, it was pretty late for me. I just had a lot of insecurities, and I had this big kind of mask. And one of my friends taught me, hey, dude, because I was like, man, you get so many girls to like you. What's the secret? And he was like, act like you don't care. And it was another layer of conditioning added on top of this just years of conditioning of stuffing my feelings. And that worked strangely, you know, certainly to a specific type of woman that I was dating. And then I had no problem dating women. But all through my 20s, and I was partying and drinking, you know, a bit like you in your early years. And I was disconnected. I was pretty lost. And I kept learning how to get girls and even guys to like me, but it was all at the expense of my integrity. I was just burying my truth, and I really didn't know who I was. I was pretty depressed inside, and I was disconnected from myself, which is why I was drinking so much and using drugs. Nature was kind of my happy place where I'd kind of find glimmers of myself, and then I would go back to just boozing it up with the guys. But enough failed relationships, you know, I kept women at an arm's length, and it was like the 7th failed relationship after about 10 years with another awesome woman. We were in a Whole Foods parking lot, and I'm like, I think, you know, I was dreading breaking up with another awesome person, and I had been kind of rehearsing it on the way to the Whole Foods parking lot, and I was like, okay, how am I going to say this? I was trying to get her to break up with me because I was too much of a coward to just look her in the eyes and tell her. And we started to break up in the car, and I'm just hearing myself repeat myself like I've been here so many times, and I was like, and I just said out loud, like, I think I have a problem. And she's like, yeah, I think you do. And she suggested counseling, and I was like, well, wait, I've been here before, and I'm breaking up with you, and I've had this conversation many times, and I'm starting to see in this moment that maybe, just maybe, I am the problem here. Because I'm the one common denominator in all these failed relationships. And she's like, yeah, I think you are. And I drove away after that breakup. We hugged, and it was cordial. I actually felt pretty liberated, not because I kind of got it over with, but because I was onto myself, and I was like, holy shit, if it's true that I'm the problem, I can actually do something about that. And then from that day forward, man, I just haven't looked back, and I just went to grad school, studied psychology, and have devoured personal growth and relationship work ever since.
Wow, you went all in. And most guys would be like, maybe I'll go see a therapist or buy a self-help book. You went to grad school.
Yeah, I became one.
You became one, right? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that definitely qualifies you as an expert, both from an experiential side as well as the academic side.
Right.
Tell us about one of the things that I've noticed is these two themes of guilt and shame come up again and again around relationships.
Totally.
And also the inability for individuals to kind of open up and connect deeply. What is your view on that? And I know, like, I've devoured a few of Brene Brown's work, and she's really big on studying shame and guilt and its role in the world, and how, like, it's not limited to just like a small percentage of our population. It's almost universal. It's like baked into our culture, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and then we got these institutions that really reinforce the guilt and shame approach, right? Schools and
Right.
religion and all that.
Right.
So yeah, guilt and shame are huge drivers for relationship pain and people really not getting empowered. And I think so. If I were to define both, and we teach this in our courses, shame is the perception that I've caused myself more harm than good, and guilt is the perception that I've caused you more harm than good. So shame is more about self.
Shame is self-directed and guilt is other-directed.
Yeah, that's right. So just to use an example to ground this, let's say and a lot of shame is born out of comparison, in my opinion, comparison to fantasies and comparison to other people. So if I'm on Instagram and I'm comparing myself to Mark, or like I look at your workout versus mine, I'm like, oh shit, what's wrong with me? Because I'm comparing myself to you, expecting myself to be like you, right? So I'm going to feel some shame about that. Now, if guilt, on the other hand, is like, let's say you and I had a conversation and I told you you said, hey, Jayson, I really need you to be here at 5 a.m. for this workout. And I said, cool. And then I slept in. Not only am I going to feel shame because I let myself down, but I'm going to feel guilt because I let you down. Right? So I think shame and guilt are huge because we're in a world of comparison right now, especially with Instagram and social media. Yeah. And it just leads people to feeling bad.
Do you think they always go hand in hand or can they exist independently?
I think they exist independently. For example, so like masturbation, a guy masturbating to porn is a classic one, right? A lot of guys, I'd say most guys, are going to feel shame after that unless it's part of their practice. It's they give themselves permission to do this. It's a self-pleasure practice. Their partner's in on it, which is very few guys, right?
Right. You don't find that in many self-development books, right?
No. But that is one path for porn that can be okay for some guys, but very few guys are doing it that way, right?
Interesting.
So yeah, I think a lot of guys just mostly are feeling shame more than guilt around their porn use. If they're in a partnership and they're hiding it, they're going to feel some guilt.
Interesting. Yeah, I see. That's very, very helpful actually to parse those out and to define them like that. And so you say these are coming largely from culture, a culture of comparison, a culture of perfectionism. And that's all part of what we would call our background of obviousness or your conditioning. So you're inside the bottle, you can't read the label. So, you found kind of clarity through many years of failed relationships. Is there a quicker way? How can
no shit, man. Yeah, I think so. I say to people a lot, like there's just really one thing required to have a good relationship. And it's just very simple. It's just a willingness to work on it. And if someone has a willingness to work on it, like anything's possible. You don't have to like read 100 books or go to get a 3-year master's program degree in psychology like me. You can be willing and be communicative in your behavior and your actions to your partner or family member or friend. And that is everything. It goes such a long way. And that's usually what another person needs is just, I need you to come meet me halfway here and be willing.
Right. I love that orientation, just that mindset that I'm going to enter into a relationship with someone, like a singular relationship, a love or a heart relationship, with the objective of us growing together. I think that's kind of rare, but what a nice approach to that, right? I mean, that's the way it worked with my wife and I. She is a therapist, and we approached it as kind of we're friends first, and then we're gonna, there was no way that we weren't going to grow or I wasn't going to grow. And of course, she was always committed to growing. And so, we've had a ton of therapy together, both individually as well as couples therapy. And it's a daily practice that at first feels like work, and then we call it work, but ultimately it's really joyful and playful and becomes just kind of the fabric of who you are.
Yeah, right? I'm so with you, man. It's another thing we have in common there is being married to therapists. And early on, that was not so pleasant for me, but
totally. I remember the first time, like I got hit across the head with a 2x4. I'm a Navy SEAL, and I'm like, "Hey, honey, you want to go down to McPee's with me?" Which is where all the SEALs, the bar that all the SEALs hang out in Coronado. And we weren't married yet, but we've been dating, and we had chosen to be exclusive. And she just looks at me. She goes, "No, but go have fun. And in that last, sentence, I was like, she clearly doesn't mean that, nor does she want me to go.
Right.
I was wise enough to look at her and be like, okay, maybe I won't go if you're not going to come with me. And
yeah. Our fights were early on. Our fights were like 3 hours long because we just, we're analyzing each other, two therapists just trying to figure each other out. And most of it was trying to, label the other person. No, you're the one that's projecting, you're projecting,
Right. I love that.
Very little ownership. Well, we got smarter and now.
Yeah. Well, that's another really good point. Just going to school, and learning about it doesn't make you a great communicator, or doesn't make you emotionally aware. You got to experience it. This is like embodied work, right? You got to really own it and feel it.
I think one of the toughest things is marriage. To be married to another human being and then to move in with them, share finances and add on kids to the mix. I think it's a steep path. And I often say to people, look, I don't recommend marriage to anybody unless you like to grow and develop yourself and learn about yourself, and you like human behavior and learning about other people. Then it's actually awesome.
Right.
But if you're in it for comfort and like it just feels good all the time, I think that's a recipe for failure, because most people are going to, they're going to kind of come into it expecting not fighting. And it's, if you meet the right person or find the one, it all kind of works out and we're hunky dory and everything's great. And that's a fantasy. It's another fantasy that I'm going to feel shame about. And then I'm going to probably blame my partner because I don't want to feel my shame. So I'll blame, and then I'll try to get out of that relationship and blame it on the person rather than, wow, I missed this massive opportunity to learn about myself.
Right. We've talked about therapy, or we mentioned therapy. Let's, when is therapy appropriate? How, what kind of tips can you give, especially for guys who, like my dad, grew up thinking therapy was for, people who were just really broken. It wasn't for normal guys like him. Right. So I've been calling it emotional coaching. Right. So maybe that's that's one idea, but how do you approach this with your folks?
Well, to just set up the conversation, to answer it well, I just need to acknowledge that I'm a coach now. I transitioned, I let go of my license many years ago because I wanted to help more men. And I also wanted to make relationship work more accessible. Like therapy still has quite a bit of barriers for people because they have a lot of preconceived notions about what it is. And it's only for broken people, like you're saying, or there's something wrong with you, or you have a mental illness, or, and so I'm a big fan of therapy or coaching. Like it's fine as long as the practitioner is good and knows what they're doing, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter.
Agree.
But it can be so helpful to get an outsider to help you see your shadow, to help you see your blind spots, and to help you see what you're not seeing. And it's immensely helpful. So I like to kind of reframe the whole thing as like, look, I'm not great at relationship, let's say. So I want to find a mentor to help me get better at this thing. And it might be that mentor is a coach or a therapist. It's the same with a personal trainer. Like if I know myself, we talked about this when I interviewed you, I cut corners sometimes in my workouts, and you're like, how you do anything is how you do everything. And this is where I need at times, especially if it's not high enough on my values, I'll need some external accountability, like a trainer, to hold me to what I say I'm going to do. Right. And that's going to make me stronger. Versus if I kind of think I've got this, which a lot of men sort of like, no, I got this. I know my wife's kind of having some problems with me, but I'll figure it out. I can do this by myself. And then he doesn't tell any of his male friends. He hides it. And then he keeps like thinking he's going to like figure it out someday. And I'm just like, dude, that's so much slower than hiring like a therapist or a coach or someone good at this, or maybe not good at it, but at least studies it to help you through and develop yourself,
Yeah. I mean, we can save ourselves years or even decades of pain.
Oh my God.
By doing this. Because, everybody, like you said, they're inside the bottle. They can't read the label. They really haven't been trained to appreciate the impact they have on other people, their words, their, the emotions behind the words, the energy behind the emotions. And so this is why we get, aggressive and passive aggressive behavior, or just passive behavior. And the person delivering it is utterly clueless. They think they're being fine. My issue, because my father was really aggressive and a lot of anger and violence, I had a lot of intensity from that. That was my positive projection. Super intense. guess what? It was really positive. I think the way we are brought up has its positive and it has its shadow, and we leverage the positive, but we don't take care of the shadow often. And so I leveraged the positive to become a Navy SEAL. I was number one in my class. Now, there was a lot that went into that, a lot of training and preparation, mentally and physically. But even if I hadn't done that, as long as I was prepared, I would have made it because I was used to pain. Right. And they couldn't do anything to hurt me that my father hadn't already done. And so I see a lot of SEALs and special operators and military guys and women are like that. And they don't even acknowledge it or know it, that on the other side of that strength is a shadow. Right. And so you come out with like all this aggressive and passive aggressive communications. And, you know, one of the reasons I got off active duty when I was a lieutenant after about 8 years or right around the cusp of lieutenant commander or whatever, was this, you know, I just couldn't grow in that environment any longer. And I was married now to this therapist, and I was like, man, there's a whole nother world that I need to step into. And
that's so cool.
You can't grow beyond the system, whether it's family or organizational system that you're stuck in, you know? So I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but
I mean, well, I can relate.
It doesn't make you a bad person because, you know, you have these issues. Everyone does. So to acknowledge that and be like, oh yeah, get a coach. Just save yourself a lot of time and pain and go for it, you know?
Yeah. I think one of the Achilles heel of sort of a strong man, a quote unquote strong man, or a very resilient or stoic or powerful guy is often, maybe in your case and mine, it's rewarded so heavily and the vulnerability is punished so heavily that it sort of sets up a very lopsided male when he comes into a relationship, right? It's going to be much harder for that type of guy to have a deep emotional bond that lasts many years because he's just operating from tough is better, vulnerability is weak, emotions are weak. Because, you know, what I was doing, all these women, because I'd buried my emotions, I was attracting into my life all these emotional women to get me to own this disowned part of myself, right?
Fascinating.
And so I would, as soon as they got emotional and the conversation got hard, I would just push them away. And then I'd go get a beer and I'd go climbing and I just couldn't stand it. But little did I know that they were actually trying to help me wake up and help me own and take responsibility for my sensitive side, which now is a tremendous superpower, right? It's like, it's what helps me grow this business so powerfully and have an awesome family is this part of myself that I was rejecting.
Right. Hey, folks, I want to bring your attention to a product developed by a Navy SEAL friend of mine who was a doctor. First, he was a SEAL, then he became a doctor, and then he went back and worked with the SEALs. His name is Doc Parsley. Some of you might have heard of him by now. We call him the Sleep Doc. All these SEALs were starting to come to him and you know, with these symptoms that looked like adrenal fatigue. And so he started treating adrenal fatigue and realized that the common denominator with all these guys that they weren't sleeping. It's a pretty big problem in military spec ops with the pace of operations and combat. And these guys were just all out of whack. Cortisol was racing their body. Their hormones were depleted. And, you know, they had essentially the testosterone level of 13-year-old girls is the way he jokes about it. They had a big problem. And what he found is that they were working out like madmen, but they're putting on weight. Their, you know, cognitive level was like they were drunk. Anyways, they had this perception that they could perform, but they just couldn't perform anymore. And it was a real problem. So he identified that the common denominator was lack of sleep. So even an hour of not enough sleep a night over the course of a year is going to lead to 14 pounds of weight gain and could degrade your performance by up to 30%. Throws your testosterone, your growth hormones, insulin sensitivity all out of whack. And it's going to create emotional instability, decision-making challenges, impulse control challenges, and decrease your willpower. Basically, your prefrontal cortex is compromised. So what he did is he went around and he said, go buy this, and then, you know, start taking it, and it worked. And so they said, well, this is a pain in the neck to buy all this. Can you put it all together into one thing? And so that became Doc Parsley's sleep remedy. I tried this recently at our Unbeatable Mind Summit, and it worked really, really well. I kid you not. Like, I took it and I fell asleep within 20 minutes, and I didn't have any grogginess when I woke up. I thought it was great stuff. So I told him I wanted to let my folks know about it, let, you know, people who are listening to this podcast know about it. And he offered everyone a 10% off. So if you want to try Doc Parsley's sleep remedy, which is essentially it's just a supplement. It's a nutritional supplement. It's all natural stuff, which creates a normal cascade of the physiological things that are supposed to happen when you're going to go to sleep. But a lot of us don't have that cascade or don't have that stuff happening anymore because of our lifestyle. So this will kind of stimulate proper, preparation for sleep and the sleep cycles. He has an unlimited, no questions asked, money back guarantee. You can't beat that. So go to docparsley.com, DOCPARSLEY.com, and use the code Unbeatable Mind, all one word, all one word, Unbeatable Mind, when you check out to get 10% off. And highly recommend it. Hoo-yah. You talk about disappearing in a relationship. What is that like? Is that what you were doing when you grabbed the beer and slipped out the back jack to go hiking? Is that disappearing, or is it?
No, it was more like some of us there's two attachment styles, generally speaking. I mean, there's four, but if we just keep it really basic here, there's people that go toward relationship under stress. They go toward the other person because they're anxious. And then there's people who, when it gets stressful in the relationship, they go away from the other person. So that's a kind of a
codependence more, or
not necessarily. Codependence can look like that, where I'm trying to help you, but you don't help me back. That's more codependence.
I see.
Distancing is just like, hiding out is someone who, let me just talk about distancing. Distancing, because it's easier to understand, is you and I get in a fight, Mark. We're in a relationship, and I'm the one who shuts down, and you want to keep talking about it, and I just shut down, and it's really hard for me to come back around, and it takes me hours or days to come around. This is extremely problematic in relationships, but it's very normal.
It's pretty common, yeah.
Yeah, and it's really has to do with people's earliest, imprint of connection in the first 2 years of life, their attachment style. And it has a massive impact later on. And it's not a problem from a growth standpoint. It's a huge problem if you just want things to kind of be easy.
So disappearing is when you do one of these things, right? Which
I think disappearing
shuts you off from.
I think disappearing is I just go away and I shut you out. Exactly. And it's not really fair. It's not really cool. Like, it's okay to do that for a period of time, like a couple hours or a day, but to stay kind of hiding and not dealing with the problems that we're encountering is just not cool. It's not respectful to your partner.
Yeah, that can be pretty painful, actually.
Totally. Yeah.
Experience that. So how do couples develop the skill to have these conversations? I think you use the term therapy talk, like between each other, so that, we can help each other grow through these challenges. Yeah.
If I'm talking to a man, I probably don't use that term, therapy talk, because that can be off-putting. But it's just like, again, I talk about like just relational literacy, and can you understand your partner's way of communication? It's going to be a little different than yours. Can you understand your own? Are you open to feedback? Are you open to reflections? Is there a willingness, as we talked about earlier, online? Because again, like, we're going to navigate not only challenges in our relationship, but we're going to navigate challenges like we're dealing with right now, the coronavirus and the economy tanking, and one of us loses our job. And these are enormous stressors for some people. And if we don't have a good system of communication, if we don't have agreements in place to help us navigate difficulty, primarily conflict and stress, we are basically subordinating to our history and our reactivity of the scared animal living inside of us. And that just doesn't go that well for people. So we all have to learn how to, I call it a scared animal, like our nervous system and our brain that gets scared when a person raises their voice or goes away. Our scared animal kind of flares up a little bit. And we have to learn how to work with our own scared animal and the scared animal inside of our partner. And a lot of it comes down to good communication, but there's another huge piece, which is, we talked about on our podcast, which is meditation, mindfulness, really just the ability to sit with discomfort. And so many people don't know how to do that, right? Because as a kid, people got punished or whatever with their emotions. So it's like, oh, my experience is bad. My experience is problematic. My experience is going to lead to hitting or fighting or distancing. And I don't want that. So I'll just avoid being in my experience. And so many people, as you know, are disconnected from their experience. So I always teach couples, you got to learn how to be with emotion, be with strong emotion and pain and discomfort.
Right. And that also allows you to be able to listen better,
Absolutely.
or period. Right. If you're all caught up in your emotions and you're not dealing with them or you're not present to them, and then, your mind is going to be spinning out of control and you're going to end up shutting down. And then you have no capacity to hear or to listen
Yep.
to.
That's right.
What's coming out of your.
Yeah. Well said. I mean, and that's so much of what our partner wants us to do is to listen and to be present. And my wife, we have a rule of thumb in our marriage that I now teach in our school, which is I don't understand her until she feels understood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big one, because before that, I was just like a dense dude. And I was just like, no, honey, I do understand you. Here's what you said. And I'm defending, myself. And she's like, well, I don't feel understood. And I'd be like, well, I do understand you. Like, where's that conversation going to go? Right.
It's still about you and not her. Right.
Yeah. So I just switched the game and said the frame and said, look, cool. I'm going to, from now on, I don't really understand you until you let me know that I do.
Interesting. I love that. And so many guys are taught or have the paradigm that, they're there to fix. We addressed this at the beginning. The male paradigm is I got to go.
Yep.
I'm the producer and I'm the fixer. And so as long as I'm making the money and providing for the household, then check, that's 50%. And then if anything's broken, including the relationship, then I'll fix it.
Yeah.
Because the woman doesn't want to be fixed. They're not broken. They just want to be understood. Right.
Yeah. We call it fracking. No fracking in communication, which is the F is no fixing. R is no rescuing. A is no advice giving, C is no complaining, and K is no killing her experience. So it's just an easy way to remember, like, don't do that. Instead, try to understand her experience, listen a little deeper, validate her. There's so many things we can do to differently, but a lot of guys are just habitually fracking on their partner.
So what is your best advice to interrupt the pattern and to get into a listening, receiving, not fracking mode for a guy?
I mean, the breath is huge. If you can take 10 breaths, 5 breath, 1 breath, these are just, it's like you teach, it's just state changes sometimes that can help us calm down, right? So that's big. Calling a timeout is okay. Hold on, I'm overwhelmed, or I'm noticing I'm escalating. All of that can be difficult to do in the moment. And I think what's more important than what do we do sort of in the moment or beforehand, besides setting context and making sure we have agreements in place, is that to know that we're all going to have conflict. It's going to get messy. We are going to raise our voice. We are going to shut down or dissociate or do different things. The key is how quickly you can return, and can you return with that willingness online, a willingness to listen, a willingness to take responsibility for your part. The research shows that it's the repair. It's not the conflict that's problematic. It's the unwillingness or inability to repair that's problematic.
Right. No, that is profound, because you're right. I mean, most people try to avoid conflict, and because of that, they dance around the issues, or they ignore or deny the issues, and then they get stuck, and then the growth stops. So the conflict's not the problem. It's just like looking outside and saying change is the problem. If things would just go back the way they used to be, we'd be fine. Well, no, your inability to change is the problem.
Exactly. Right? You got it.
So conflict is where the growth comes from.
Oh my God, totally. Yeah, this situation we're in right now, like the pandemic. I'm growing like a weed right now because I'm being forced to adapt.
We all are, right? Yeah. Now we're running out of time, but I want to talk about, it's one thing to have, two people having a relationship. That's enormously complicated in and of itself. But then you introduce kids into the equation, and now you have, I've seen it, like the number of relationships becomes exponential, right? Yeah. Each individual parent has a relationship. Then there's the joint relationship between the parent and the kid. Then you add 2 kids, and now you can, what was 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 different relationships becomes like 10 all of a sudden. And I'm making those numbers up, but you know what I'm talking about. Yeah. How do we, how does that complicate things? I mean, I just said it complicated things, but what's your perspective on that? And how can we navigate that?
Yeah, I think first of all, like people should have kids if they feel inspired to do so, knowing that it's going to be a tremendous lift and a lot of work. Right. If you're having kids because you should, you're going to have a very hard time parenting.
Yeah.
And a lot of people I think just compare and go, well, I'm 35, I should have kids now.
Right.
And it looks like kids is fun and other people look like they're happy, or you see the opposite, it looks miserable, which is more what I saw.
There is so much conditioning around that, isn't there? Social
Totally,
conditioning,
man.
formal conditioning is like, oh yeah, my people don't recognize. I grew up with 4 siblings, so I'm going to have 4 siblings. They don't even realize that's a pattern. That's a conditioned pattern.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to do the deep work to find out if you want to be married or have kids, because I didn't want either, because I just looked around and it looked like a shit show to me. But I had a turn because I did the work, and I was like, wow, actually I do want to partner with someone. Actually, I do want a family. So if you get to a yes, then it's like, be prepared to completely transform yourself, and allow your kids and your children to educate you and to help you grow. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. I think one of the greatest accomplishments of my life is being a dad. I love being a father, and I recommend it big time. But you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and deal. My kids have pushed me, almost as much or more than my wife. And that, I want that in my life. I want that accountability. I want to grow like that. And it's taught me about love in a whole different way that I wasn't prepared for. To be loved by children is spectacular. And then to love children, even when they're being a pain in the ass, it's like, it's just, there's so much here that this could be another podcast, but I'm a big fan, and I do encourage people to do find out if that's something you want, but be prepared to be dismantled a lot and to grow a lot.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The puzzle pieces all come apart, and then you have to put them back together in a new arrangement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all about the we, us, it's not about me anymore. So it's a great way to grow beyond the limited ego.
Yeah, you said it. It's so much about we now, and my wife and kids keep me accountable. I have a very focused mission. I'm very mission focused like you. And if I'm too mission focused, right, my wife and kids will let me know in some way, shape, or form. And because I want a family, I don't want to go all in on my mission at the expense of my marriage or kids, right? At the same time, if I were to go all in on marriage and kids, I would feel like I'm missing something with my mission. So it's this amazing koan, really, and a balance between my mission and my family. It's just constant balancing act.
Yeah. And sometimes that ebbs and flows, like the current crisis. A lot of individuals, breadwinners, are thinking, holy cow, man, I've got to step up to the plate and figure this shit out. And so there might be a conversation to be had with your family, be like, hey, I might be a little bit on edge, or I'm going to be focused on this mission. I've got to, save my business or whatever. And they're going to cut you a lot of slack.
Yeah.
And then, you make it up for them in other ways. It doesn't have to be time. It could be just presence, for the amount of time you do have with them. Right?
Yeah, totally. And I find that, I don't know about you, but I'm guessing it's true for you, is my partner provides me so much fuel to do my mission, because if our connection is strong and good, I feel like anything's possible. When our connection's not great, I feel like I'm hobbling around a little bit, not as strong, So that's the power of a partner, and also even a family, is there can be a lot of life-giving nourishment and energy there. And if it's draining, then that's just a sign that you probably need to put more attention on there and work through the challenges that are occurring.
Yeah, I agree. Jayson, thanks so much. It's been really, really enlightening. Really appreciate your work and your time today. Where can people find out more about your work and what you're doing?
Yeah, so it's relationshipschool.com. And our podcast is The Relationship School. Got hundreds of episodes there on, conflict and communication and listening and sex and all that stuff.
Very cool. And so people can reach you through those channels if they want to reach out and talk about coaching or anything like that.
Yeah. The Relationship School, or relationshipschool.com, is probably the best place. And you can email us there through the contact form, and it'll eventually get to me. And we have trainings and events. We train coaches now, relationship coaches, and we have lots of cool stuff.
And you're retooling your business, you mentioned, so you're going online just like everyone else.
Yeah, man, it's wild, right? We have a lot of in-person events like you, and we're trimming those to now virtual events. We have a couple of virtual events coming up in May that I'm excited. I'm just like, let's see how this goes. And what's cool is we'll reach more people and hopefully get more international people able to attend.
Now, assuming that we can meet up in large groups again, you'll bring back the in-person events, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think we're kind of aiming for the fall, and maybe that's a liberal or conservative estimate depending on who you're talking to. But I think the fall, we have our first event live in October. We're not going to do anything before October, I don't think, at this point.
Right.
I don't know about you.
Right. Well, we have a Seal Fit Kokoro event, a Crucible event in July, and so we're not sure. We haven't canceled it, but we're just gonna play it by ear.
Yeah, day to day, right?
Yeah, day to day. We'll see how that goes. All right. On that note, Jayson, thanks again. I appreciate you, and look forward to watching your work unfold. And I'm here to be of service if I can help you out with anything.
Yeah, likewise, Mark. Thanks so much. I really appreciate what you're up to and who you are and how you roll.
Hoo-yah. All right, folks, that was Jayson Gaddis. Check him out at relationshipschool.com or the Relationship School podcast. Is that right, Jayson?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's really important work. I mean, this is like where the rubber meets the road for development. I mean, what happens, under the roof of our homes is the richest, most fertile ground for growth. So don't blow it off, and reach out to Jayson if he can help you. So on that note, stay focused, seek the opportunities, pay attention to the trends, but don't get sucked into the fear, right? Maintain that unbeatable mind, and we'll get through this stronger and more resilient. And then we can rejigger and reorganize for a more productive and more inclusive future. On that note, this is the end of the Unbeatable Mind podcast. My name is Mark Divine. Thanks for joining me. Hoo-yah.
Lock and load, boys. Time to explode, boys. Make sure you get home, boys. They got your back, the pride of the fleets, the bright swinging frog men.